As a first-time buyer, it can be a daunting task to go out there and figure out the steps and requirements you need to get started in the process of purchasing a home, and not only purchasing a home, but being successful in the overall process. So when you start driving a car, you don't want to start driving without lessons. You won't know what to do, what gears to get into, when to push the brakes. So same thing when buying your first home. You need the steps, you need the guidance in order to get there, and I will do my best to give you 5 great steps to help get you started.
They say this is a big rich town.
Now let's get into it. First tip. The first thing to do as a first-time home buyer is to get a pre-approval. And that's not going on the computer, punching in some numbers, and getting a message saying you've been approved. This is actually going through the full process where you go to the bank or you go to a mortgage broker, and they look at your full credit report, they look at your income, they look at your total debts, and then they tell you what the amount is you can get approved for. And there's a couple ways to go about it. You can actually go to your mortgage specialist at your bank. And there's some benefits of going to your mortgage specialist at the bank because you already have a relationship with them, you bank with them, and there's a possibility you can get some things bundled where you can get approved for a certain amount. Now you can actually go to a mortgage broker, and what they do, they look at the same exact things. Now with the mortgage broker, there's more of an advantage because they go to various banks and they shop around and they actually work for you. So your mortgage broker will not get paid until you get your mortgage done and everything closes. So they have to work for you. They have to make sure you're getting the best rates out there with the best banks. And with the actual approval that you will be getting, make sure it's actual commitment letter. And what they'll do for you, they'll also hold an interest rate for you for a certain period of time. So typically it's about 3 to 4 months. Once you get approved, they'll hold that interest rate for you, and then once you go shopping for your home, once you actually get your house and you close, you get that same interest rate that was promised for you from the beginning. Okay, tip number 2, must-haves and type of property. So figure out exactly what type of property you're looking for and have a list of your must-haves. So every time you go out to look at a property, you have your checklist. Take your checklist with you, so that way while you're going through the property, you're able to check things off that you certainly need to have. And obviously there's some things that you can go without. For example, if you need to have 4 bedrooms, and there's no way a great kitchen will make up for that 4th bedroom. So if you're going through a property, sometimes it's a lot of emotions involved. You get very excited if you see the property like, oh, this might be the one, and you may forget certain things. And you may say, okay, you know what? I will actually take this beautiful kitchen over the 4th bedroom when you know very well you cannot make up for that 4th bedroom and you need it. So definitely have a checklist of wants and needs. So every time you go out to see a property, take your checklist with you, and as you're going through the property, make sure you check off the things that you definitely need and definitely want, because once you close on that property, you do not want to have buyer's remorse based on a decision you made at a time where the emotions were running high. Okay, tip number 3. I feel this is a very important tip, if probably not the most important tip. Have a budget and stick to it. And this is a 2-part budget thing. So it's like, have a budget of the total amount that you are spending on the property and stick with it. And then also your monthly budget. So your monthly carrying costs for the property. So your mortgage, your property taxes, if you're in a condo, maintenance fees. And then you have to understand there's going to be other things that you're going to be paying as well. So you're going to be paying utilities and other utilities, and there's other monthly costs that may be associated with the property, such as hot water tank or things like that. So make sure you run a budget, have know your carrying costs that you're going to have to pay monthly, and stick with that. There's programs out there that you can run where you can actually go through the numbers, and they'll show you exactly for the amount of property that you're purchasing, what your mortgage will be, what your property taxes will be, and what your utilities will be. I actually have a Excel file. So I used to be a reports analyst, so I've created this Excel file where I just plug in numbers, and you'll know to almost to the T what your exact monthly cost will be. So have that in mind and keep it in mind, because as you go into your property and as time goes on, you want to make sure that the numbers stick the same, especially if you have a job and your income stays the same every month. You want to make sure you have that. And you want to go into a property where you're having a little bit money where you can save as well. So have a little money set aside. So very, very important. Understand your budget and stick to it. Tip number 4, location. You want to make sure you are when you are out searching for your property, especially as a first time buyer, you want to make sure you get the proper location. So whether you're looking in the suburbs or you're looking in the city, you want to make sure your property is in a location where it's close to all the amenities. So if you have kids, make sure the schools are nearby. You want to make sure there's big box stores. If there's you go to the gym, you want to make sure there's a gym there. You want to make sure that it's in close proximity to highways. So you want to make sure there's easy or quick access. If you're living in the city, you want to make sure there's definitely quick access to the transit so you get where you need to be. On top of that, these are the things that will down the road will bring value to your property when you go to sell it. As far as resale, it'll bring up the value of your property, or it'll maintain that price of your property. So you want to make sure you have that in mind. And if you're looking for a property for the first time, you want to make sure it's in an area that's there's going to be growth as well. You want to make sure it's not an area where, you know what, there's issues or there's problems. And if you have a good realtor, then they will definitely know where to look, or they'll definitely understand like what's going on within the area, and they'll be able to alert you if there's any issues. So definitely make sure you select a good area. Also, where there's growth. So if you see there's a new development happening, then you definitely want to be there, because you know that down the road there's going to be price growth, there's going to be more things coming along, and there will be appreciation in your property. So definitely look out for that. As far as a tip goes, location is important. Step number 5, interview a few buyer agents that's going to be working on your behalf. Now, there's a difference between a listing agent and a buyer agent. A listing agent is the realtor who has the listing of the property, and they're pretty much working on the behalf of their client. Now, it may seem like as a first-time buyer, you're looking at these listings, you call a listing agent, you go take a look at the property itself, and then you decide you want to work with them, and because no one has referred a buyer agent to you, or you haven't interviewed a buyer agent. So you're working with the listing agent, and they say, you know what, we'll get you a fair deal. So one thing you have to remember is the listing agent will always work on the behalf of the seller agent, on behalf of the sellers, and you come along and they will say they're going to give you a fair deal, but their ultimate goal is to get the best possible price and the most money for their sellers. That's just the reality of it. So you might think like, okay, you know what, I'm saving $2,000 to $5,000 off, but you have the right buyer agent, you might be able to get $10,000 off or $15,000 off that property. So don't be fooled by the fact that, oh, you know what, I'm going to go to the listing agent and I'm going to save a bit of money because they're paying less commission. And when it comes to a buyer agent, you are not paying any commission. That comes from the sale of the property. So you don't have to worry about anything coming out of your pocket. Just do your due diligence and interview a few realtors, ones that's going to have your best interest in mind, one who's very knowledgeable, very accessible, and will negotiate hard on your behalf. So that's a very important tip to have. And if you need any help, if you want questions, some hard-hitting questions to ask your buyer agent, definitely let me know and I could give you some tips. Okay, bonus tip. For closing costs, a lot of times, well, as a first-time buyer, you may not know what's involved with the closing costs. So it's not just your down payment that you need to have. You also need to have these final costs for closing. And just be sure you have that in mind, so that way when everything is said and done and when it comes to closing date, you are not caught off guard and you don't need to go look at ask for additional money from family members or whatever the case may be. So towards the end of closing, once you actually go to closing, sometimes what the sellers will do, the previous homeowner or current homeowner, they would have paid some property taxes ahead of time. So those are the things, if there's any property taxes paid ahead of time, you have to pay those property taxes at closing. another one, actually the major one, is land transfer tax. So when you go purchase a property, you as a buyer have to pay that land transfer tax. So be sure you have that amount ready available for when you go to close a property. And there's calculators that you have that will give you those numbers. And like I said, I have an Excel report built, so that way when I run calculations for my clients, then we have that number in place, so that way at closing time they know exactly what they're paying for land transfer tax. Keep in mind, if you're buying a property in Toronto, you have to pay double the land transfer tax, so definitely keep that in mind. Also lawyer fees, make sure you calculate that towards the end of closing. So the total amount of closing costs will probably roughly be 1.5%. So definitely keep that in mind. And that's a bonus tip. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this video today. If you find it useful, if you find it knowledgeable, definitely subscribe, definitely share it with friends and family. Thank you again for taking the time to listen. I appreciate every single one of you. Take care for now.